You're listening to Becoming Wildly Resilient, brought to you by University of Kentucky Human Resources, Health and Wellness. Join us as we explore tools, practices, meditations, and conversations with the members of the UK community. Together, we will discover how we can thrive at work, home, and beyond. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Becoming Wildly Resilient Conversations. My name is Sebastian Calmes, your host for today's episode. I'm a wellness specialist with University of Kentucky Human Resources, Health and Wellness. Today on the show, I have Dr. David Weisenhorn, and we're discussing technology, social media, digital well-being, and the positive and negative impacts it has on our daily lives. Dr. David Weisenhorn, thank you for being on the show with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Would you mind telling me a little bit about your background, your role at UK, and how you landed here?
I am a senior specialist for parenting and child development. I work in the College of Family and Consumer Sciences Extension. I started my doctoral work in 2014 and finished in 17. What was interesting is I didn't know much about extension, but I was working with a professor by the name of Kiri Ashurst. Shout out to her. She's awesome. She had written a grant when I had gotten here, and I think she'd written it a few years before, and I was working with military teens and their military parent. They could either be deployed, post-deployed, or pre-deployed veterans. They were working to get those families back together through some high-adventure experience and just connecting in the wilderness. And through that work as a graduate assistant, I became familiar with extension. While I was here, the parenting and child development specialist took another role. The folks in extension had known me, and I said, hey, maybe you should apply. I did, and long story short, here I am. I came in 2013, and we're at 24, so coming on 11 years at UK.
Thank you for your service to UK and Lexington as a whole. For people listening to this, why should they care about technology and social media habits?
The advancement of technology does not appear to be slowing. I think what's growing with new AI advancements and seemingly doing something new all the time. Back in May of 23, Dr. Murthy, the Surgeon General, sent a warning to the Senate Finance Committee and the public that said social media has a profound risk of harm to adolescent health. He urged parents and the government to set limits and devise stricter standards for use. He says, we do not yet have evidence to determine if social media is sufficiently safe for children and adolescents. Then he proceeds with 20 pages of studies showing the negative effects of social media, specifically on young people, adolescents. When you think about that, why should they be doing this? There's not that many warnings in our history when the Surgeon General says, hey, we should watch out for this. In the early 60s, Nixon said there was a warning concerning violence on TV. There was a warning around smoking. In 86, there was a warning about AIDS. And then in 2016, it was on e-cigarettes, and then now in 2023, it's on social media. If you track what we're talking about and what we were doing, I think it's important when a Surgeon General says, this is not safe. So why should they be interested in listening? Because there are some things that we want to make sure we're not doing that could lead us into an unhealthy state of life. There was this idea of being careful because it's going to create a shift in your behavior. That is really what I want to say about social media. We're aware of the fact when we use it, even when the intention's good, there's a shift in our behavior, especially if it's prolonged use. We need to be mindful of what is that shift that's happening. Is it positive? Is it negative? If we're self-reflective, we find there's some things I want to learn more about so that it doesn't become detrimental.
Do you think there is such a thing as digital well-being? If there is, how would you define digital well-being?
Yeah, I think that's a term being used. A good site I would refer people to is the Digital Wellness Lab by Boston Children's Hospital. It's called the Digital Wellness Lab. They're coining that term. What's interesting about what their site shows you is that it's got constructs, and it says there's a lot of problem around digital use. Make sure you're being a good digital user and check your digital well-being. They give you 4 questions. Am I being mindful? Are you being present? Are you enjoying the people or events around you? Or are you mindlessly scrolling? The next one is, am I being kind? We can quickly comment or reply to posts without taking much time to consider if my words are supportive or helpful. How will my reply make others feel? When I'm using it, am I being kind? Is this creating kindness in me? The third is, am I being constructive? Is this a good use of my time? Can I be doing something more productive or important? And the last one is, am I being healthy? Am I being safe for myself mentally, emotionally, and physically? Is this a good use of my time? Is this helping me? And am I being kind to others through my use? Yes, digital well-being has a place, but it belongs under a wellness construct we already have.
The University of Kentucky Human Resources recognizes 8 dimensions of well-being, and they are physical, financial, occupational, mental, emotional, intellectual, social, environmental, and spiritual health. So you think digital well-being should be included in this list?
I do, because of how we call it. We call it social media. If there's already a social construct of well-being, is the use of our media for the intention of being connected? Maybe that's not how we're all using it. If we think of it as social media and there's a construct of wellness that is social, it probably belongs under that social aspect. But we could argue we're not using media for social purposes.
What other digital media could be included in digital well-being? When I think of digital media, I'm thinking of not only social media, but also the internet in general, or TV, Netflix, YouTube. For myself, I've had a odd relationship with social media and even YouTube, because when am I going to stop? Then I'm just going to remove it, which I have. And sometimes I re-download it, and then I'm like, I'm going to remove it again. I even removed YouTube because YouTube became the same thing for me, where I'm learning all these great things, like playing guitar or a philosophy video, but then it turns into I'm shopping for knowledge. I'm not really learning anything. I'm not even watching the video I clicked on. I'm just scrolling and looking at the other videos. What am I doing? It's like that first question on that website you mentioned, am I being mindful?
And I wonder, why are we not being mindful when we're on there? Because it's full of distraction. In some ways, YouTube, I love it, but I hate it for my kids. I love it because I'm a do-it-yourselfer. I like to fix things at home. You can fix anything by a video. Somebody else has broken it, and they took the time to make a video on how to fix it. Awesome for me. When I go on there, I am focused on why I'm on here. And I'll go look at that video, and I might have to look at 3 of them to find the exact model, or maybe this the one that I want to follow, because there's different teaching styles that meet you. When I go in there, I'm hunting for what I'm looking for, and it makes it easy for me to find it. But I've also gotten caught scrolling. You get distracted by something else that already piques my interest, but why is that on the same page? Yes. It's there for a reason. It's there because they want me to stay there. That's why it's difficult in so many ways. Why is replacing a heating element in my dryer next to something by Jordan Peterson?
According to the documentary The Social Dilemma, Tristan Harris, a former design ethicist at Google, said social media platforms are designed to be as addictive as possible, mentioning the people who use social media are likened to drug users, even sharing the same name as them, users. Do you think social media is designed to be divisive?
Absolutely. And I've watched that video. I'm glad you brought that video up. I've got a 13-year-old daughter, and then my son, who is 11. My daughter has a phone. My son is just starting to look at one and get the understanding of one. And I made him watch that video with my wife. I said, listen, I need you to know what's coming at you. It was amazing. There were several social media platforms that had representatives that were either engineers in the process or executive level individuals that were making those decisions. And they were all saying, without a doubt, there was an economic or consumer purpose, a financial reason we created this, to keep people consuming. We made this endless scroll button so you continually scroll. And we know what you like. We know if you stay on there longer, you're more likely to hit these other things. And by hitting these things, it would drive you to consume this. So, yes, in accord with one another, they all said, we absolutely created something we wish we hadn't. And that was my takeaway from that. There's a line in Jurassic Park. It was this idea of bringing dinosaurs back to an island so people could come and see what dinosaurs look like. And the scientists behind it at one point said, instead of asking, can we do it? We never asked, should we?
We've learned social media and digital media are purposely designed to be addictive and hard to pull ourselves away from. When people scroll social media, play video games, or watch Netflix for hours, what is that person really looking for? Is there a need not being met?
I think that's a good question. I don't know if there's a need being met or just this natural sense of curiosity that takes over. They know what my interests are. It's really easy to go in there and unintentionally find yourself consumed to where when you get off, you're like, man, what time is it? Escapism is something that is real, but I don't think it just happens in social media. There's a lot of other ways we want to escape. It can become that for us, but there's something about the way that it's designed that it piques our curiosities. I'm not sure if it's this innate thing of I've got something missing, I've got a hole I need to go and try and fill by searching social media. I think it's more innocent than that. But it becomes something more serious. I think it can start with a curiosity, though.
I think for me, it was escapism. I wasn't doing the things I could have been doing to make myself feel more fulfilled.
But be careful, because I think so much of our learning takes place through social engagement. There's a whole social learning theory. Bandura was all about that, on this idea that we learn through observation. And we do. Think about a young child. We'll just take a little boy. Take a little boy and his infatuation with a dump truck early on. It's like, man, I'm just going to watch this thing. You can go to a construction site right now and you'll find a little boy somewhere around just watching that. Mom's probably walked him out and he's just pointing at dump truck. This idea that we learn through observation. We learn so much through watching and observing. Again, it's curiosity, but it's also this idea of understanding, making sense of the world around us. Piaget was an early psychologist, and he equated the ways that we learn was through observation and looking, building on existing learning. We do that through identifying an object, and think of it like a bin that we put information in. And the more things we identify that look similar, we're able to relate and understand. The ways in which we learn is through looking at things and identifying how they relate to the things we already know so we can make sense of those things. When you're talking about your observations, that's that natural curiosity we have. What's right and wrong, watching people helps us to determine that.
And our smartphones and computers have a plethora of people to watch.
Yeah.
And it's like this endless learning hub.
Yeah.
Our curiosity is never satiated.
It just goes on to something else. And how far we chase that, we can just continue to go for days. The sad thing about it is because it piques our interest, we might not be aware of other things around us and lose track of time, and not feel the need to go somewhere else because we are getting our curiosities met.
I feel like we've painted this picture where there are some divisive, negative impacts social media, technology can have on our overall well-being, but also the fact that we have access to all this information and we can learn so much so quickly. You mentioned you're a skateboarder, and I mentioned I'm a guitar player. Through the internet, we were able to learn these skills in a quarter the time it took a generation before us. If Stevie Ray Vaughan was learning a tune, he has to find a radio. They have to be playing the right song, and then that's only playing for 3 minutes. But I can go on YouTube, queue up the song, the lesson, the backing track, and put it all on replay as much as I want. That's really helpful. However, when I'm searching for the lesson, I also see people already doing it maybe better than I ever will. What kind of impact do you think that has on people?
It expedites learning. Stevie Ray Vaughan, how did he know his guitar was in tune other than just his ear being tuned to it? He probably didn't have a digital tuner. There was something about his ear that allowed him to hear things. He wasn't looking at tablatures. Yeah. He wasn't looking at any of the things we would to be able to do that. Technology has expedited that learning curve and allowed more people to learn things we wouldn't normally learn. I wouldn't have been able to take apart an engine if I didn't watch it step by step. The dangers in that is I might think I'm as mechanically gifted as that mechanic, but I just watched his video. Just because I can do the same motions and do the same movements as that individual or take the same steps to get to the same result doesn't mean I'm as good as him. I think we would agree because you can play a Stevie Ray Vaughan song, you're no Stevie Ray.
I use lessons online. I have slow-mo play. I have these technology tools so I can grasp it easier. But then I'm also aware of what you said. I don't want to be playing follow the leader. What are those skills that's going to help me make that my own?
I think that's what we're talking about. When is it helping you? I think it's the heart behind what we're doing. Why am I learning it? Am I learning it because I want more knowledge? You know, knowledge puffs up. Knowledge can make you feel greater than you are. Just because I know how to play this song, now I think I'm comparing myself to this amazing artist. I'm not an artist. I'm not a guitar player, but I can play the same song he does. There's something about the knowledge piece of it that might want to puff us up and believe we're more than who we are. There's a danger in that, but that's always been the case. Anytime we have knowledge, we might think we're greater than ourselves or greater than somebody else with less. Whether or not it's a good thing comes from what's my reason? What's the point of being here?
Do you think younger generations have a harder time developing healthy technology habits?
Yes. It's interesting because if you text me on the weekend, I will not get your text, man. I do not carry my phone. I did not grow up with technology. I did not have an email account until I was a senior in college. Things have advanced so fast. When I was in the Army, I was using a calling card. Do I think it's more difficult for them to have healthy habits? Yes, because if we served ice cream all day, every day growing up, we'd have a hard time not selecting that as what we wanted to eat. We definitely have to teach children how to have healthy habits. I believe the best way to educate a child is through modeling. I've got to show them what my healthy use of social media is. I've got to show them through the way Dad puts the phone down. Dad's choosing physical exercise, and if I didn't eat well, my children wouldn't eat well. Why? Because they're learning that. They're eating the things I'm bringing home. I'm the adult in the house. Kids are always watching their parents, always. Most influential person in a child's life is a parent because they're always watching. That's the thing we were talking about. That's the social learning piece of like, pff. So when you're like, hey, don't get on your phone, but you're over there scrolling, you know, it doesn't make for
they see
it doesn't,
that.
Yeah. They see those incongruencies in their parents like fire trucks, and they're just big and red and loud. And
I heard this story. This woman took her son to see Gandhi, and the woman said, Gandhi, please tell my son to stop eating sugar. All he does is eat sugar. And he says, okay, come back in 3 days. She comes back in 3 days and says, Gandhi, please tell my son to stop eating sugar. And he's like, little boy, you need to stop eating sugar. And the mom's like, why didn't you just say that 3 days ago? And he's like, I had to stop eating sugar.
That's it. Discipline can only come from discipline. If I myself am not disciplined, I've got nothing to share. Our social constructs require us to be on phones, email. Everything has gone to a social kind of exploration. Our jobs are now social media posts. Are you tracking on Instagram? Everybody wants to know where to find you and where to look. So you've got to have all these different handles and social media accounts to contain more people. I think the way in which we handle ourselves has a big impact in teaching our kids things.
Yeah, because even the Microsoft apps we use now, like Teams, is based on a social media schema. It's like instant messaging. It operates like Facebook Messenger. In a previous episode with Dr. Laura Escobar-Ratliff, she was mentioning how we have to be intentional with connecting with people at work because it is so easy to just meet on Teams or email. Teams actually has a call button, and I used it yesterday. I was going to get into a messaging bout with somebody, and I was like, we could just call. And we figured it out in 30 seconds.
I did a parent-teacher conference last night, and one of the science teachers of my son said for the first time in the past 4 years, the overwhelming majority of students, if not all the students in her class, want a phone call. The young people are wanting that because they went through COVID as young children. They had such a traumatic experience. That was such a social disconnect for them. They want the conversation. My son calls me. He never texts me. It's bizarre to me.
Speaking of work and technology, do you think an online education is as viable as being in a classroom?
It just depends on what your outcome is. It depends on what you want to find. What are we measuring? What's the metric we're looking at to measure those two things? Because if it is convenience, I think they corner the market. E-learning is such a convenient method of getting information. But I think that has shifted our educational system. I believe it should be transformational, not transactional. You pay me this amount of money. You give me these assignments. And in return, I'm going to give you this diploma or a grade. Transactional.
There's very little transformation there, and transformation is school.
Education was uncovering who you are, wanting to learn from somebody. That touches something in you. I'm always shocked at how emotional I get on this topic. It's about having somebody you want to emulate, somebody that has knowledge you look at and you say, I want to learn something from that. I want to change. As somebody who values the whole idea of the pupil teacher, I want to impart something that might awaken something in you. Maybe e-classes can do that. I think transformations are not what they used to be in the education system. This idea of unlocking the potentials that lie dormant in young people so they can go and be their best selves, so they can go and make a contribution. No one else can. I don't want to mess that up.
It sounds like you've had some life-changing, transformational experiences in in-person learning environments.
I did. I had a professor that really cared about who I was, and it made a lasting impact. And she didn't have to. She saw it in me before I did, and cultivated it. And man, I'm grateful.
You said curiosity is a big reason why we search, scroll, and learn online. There is a need to feel. People want to feel they are alive and they are a life and they're living.
Yeah.
It's this trick that we're going to get that through technology. I think you have to look into someone's eyes. You have to smell them. You have to shake their hand. You have to be vulnerable with them. When I'm seeing you through a screen or getting likes on something or touching up an image with the infinite image processing tools, I'm not showing myself really. No one's really seeing myself. I'm not really seeing anybody else. And those are generalization comments. I think you can be sincere, but not in the same way. What you just felt and what I just saw, I've had similar feelings like that, but I don't connect them with any internet or social media experience. I only connect that kind of raw feeling with experiences I've had with people at some place or some series of places doing things. I don't connect that strong of a feeling with any internet interaction. And that tells me something.
It's interesting because when you look at the science, when it looks at the detrimental effects of social media, a lot of times they're talking about mental health, anxiety, depression. In February of 2023, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention released their 2021 findings. They compiled the data, and nearly 60% of teenage girls felt persistently sad or hopeless, and 30% said they have seriously considered suicide. That's nearly 60% of teenage girls. And they looked at it and people said, oh, well, what about the pandemic? It was a big surge. But they looked at the data and said, that's not it. We noted that in 2012, about the time social media started, they started tracking the increase. When we talk about social media and where we go, we need to be mindful. There's a real dark side to it. There's a big target piece that's missing, because why are so many people feeling hopeless? Why are they persistently sad? Why are they considering ending their life based on what they're seeing and viewing in this social connection realm? If I'm connecting to people, why don't I feel connected to people? What is it? What's not happening? We're 4 feet apart across the end of this table, but there's something about your presence that I'm feeling. And when you remove that completely, something else is removed. There's something about our senses when they're engaged. But when you go online, only 2 senses is sight and touch, and we're not really touching them. We're touching keyboards, something that doesn't have warmth and doesn't have blood pumping through it and doesn't have feelings. You saw me emotionally get stirred, and that oftentimes creates an emotional stirring in just the observation. Just you watching could feel what was happening. That's what we're missing. So take that in the concept of learning. Think about all the things you can learn, because it's not just about content. We're learning with our peers that hopefully are going to be coworkers or maybe our spouse, best friends, all of those things. The face-to-face learning environment is so much more than just regurgitation of content, like me lifting material off a page and memorizing so I can have an answer to something later. It's all the things that are happening, being able to take instruction, being able to acknowledge the learning of our peers, watching them learn, watching them struggle, watching them succeed. All of those things are impactful. When you put that behind a screen, I think they disappear. I think it's hard to feel that. It's hard to connect to that.
Absolutely. I saw the new Mean Girls movie, and
No, I haven't seen that.
I won't give any background as to why I saw it, but I saw it. They moved from South Africa to New York or something, and the main character is homeschooled most of the time. She was starting high school, and she says, "Mom, why can't you just homeschool me again?" And she says, "Honestly, you're going to learn things at school I can't teach you." Being in those settings, in those environments, with peers, with teachers, with yourself, there's a silent teacher and all that. And that's not always there on screen time. Based on our conversation so far, it sounds like in its purest use, technology and social media is a learning tool, but also an intentional connection tool. I want to share my current internet usage habits. I don't have any social media apps on my phone. I have accounts, but I don't have the apps on my phone. I don't even have YouTube app on my phone. I have to state aloud or clearly in my mind, what am I about to search and what am I trying to learn? And then I go ahead and look it up. I know my dad just went on a trip. I'm going to check out his pictures and drop them a nice comment or something. And it's mindful because I have this thing I need to do and I'm going to pick up my tool and accomplish the task. Would you agree it's meant to be a tool and it's meant to be an intentional social connection instrument?
Absolutely. I think if used properly, a tool is the best way to use it. What I was hearing you say is, David, I've set up some good boundaries around my technology use. And to me, that's a discipline. That's the thing that happens with children too early is they don't have the discipline already established to use the tool. You find out real quick how bad it is, but hopefully we have people around us to give information about that to help us. The reality is that I bet you put those boundaries around it because you wanted to make a change. It wasn't
I did.
because anybody was telling you, hey, Sebastian, your use is getting out of hand.
I had to be honest with myself. I was consuming so much of this, and I don't even have video games in my house anymore because it's so easy to escape.
So good, man. There's strength in knowing where we're weak. It's power. Hey, I know I'm not good in these things. I'm like you. The reality is I'm not a social media user, not because I'm old, but because I'm not good with it. It's the same reason there are other restrictions in my life. I got to know where I'm good and I got to know where I'm bad. There's these 4 ideals. What do we give ourselves to? It's money, fame, pleasure, and there's one more, and I can't recall that. But the idea is, if I ask you these questions, I can tell you what your idol is. What are your 4 idols? I know mine is pleasure. I know the thing that I will tend to go to is pleasure. That's why I like to skateboard, because I like the way that makes me feel. I love running and exercise. I love eating well because I like the way that makes me feel. So I have to be careful with that and guard my feelings, because a lot of things can make me feel good that aren't really good for me.
Yeah.
Being able to be disciplined, I know where I'm weak. You know?
And I don't want to miss this.
Yeah.
I don't want to miss this. It's not worth it to me. I can't miss this.
Yeah.
Because if I do later, that's going to suck.
It's going to suck, man. You got so many people around you right now that love you. You'd be hard-pressed to show me an individual that nobody loves. We're all loved.
Yeah.
But we don't know it because we're not engaging in it. We're not investing in it.
And maybe not living ourselves.
Yeah. We could talk a lot about that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a tool. It's a tool I think needs to be used with caution.
David, thanks so much for being on the show with me. Before we wrap up, what do you want to leave listeners with?
I think there's a lot of good that comes through our technology, but I want people to realize there's a lot of bad in it too. And be aware of the 2 things. Most importantly, you are the best judge of whether it's good or not. It's not me. It's not Sebastian. You are the only one that can change you for the better. And so take a hard look. Examine how social media is in your life. Look at the data, how it is in others. Find some ways to put some barriers, some guidelines to your use. Protect yourself. It's important we look at how we're taking care of ourselves. That extends into our social media use.
In this conversation, we explored the topic of digital well-being and how it impacts other dimensions of wellness. We learned that technology is like a tool, something to be used with a specific purpose. With any tool, it can be used for good or for ill. This conversation reminds us to be mindful and intentional with technology. Without mindfulness and discipline, technology and social media can quickly become a hindrance to well-being. Educate yourself on what technology and social media. Social media is designed to be addictive. With this information, we are better equipped to create positive technology and social media habits. Thank you for listening to Becoming Wildly Resilient. This podcast is brought to you by University of Kentucky Human Resources, Health and Wellness. We offer a wide range of online and in-person services to support the well-being of UK employees, retirees, and their spouses. You can find experts in mental health, personal resilience, nutrition, and physical activity. We're ready to meet you where you are and address your unique needs. To learn more about the work, life, and well-being services offered by UK Human Resources, visit hr.uky.edu/wellbeing. You can also connect with us on social media and YouTube by searching @UKY Wellness or by email at healthandwellness@uky.edu.